Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by The Black Tux. Have a wedding or event where you need to wear a suit or tuxedo? TheBlackTux.com is your answer. To get 20% off your purchase, visit TheBlackTux.com/twist. And by Ring. Stop crime before it happens. Help make your neighborhood safer with Ring. Save up to $150 on a Ring security kit at ring.com/twist.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of This Week in Startups. This is the show where we talk to entrepreneurs, pundits, investors about technology companies, startups here in the Silicon Valley and in other locations too. My guest today for our news roundtable, we're going to talk about a lot of important issues, specifically Facebook and Russia, and get a little into crypto, and those two topics will take about 4 hours each, so buckle in. Clara Brenner has been on the program, I believe, 2 or 3 times. She is was the founder of Tummel, which is a great incubator here, and now she is the managing partner of the Urban Innovation Fund. But it's your first time on the News Roundtable.
That's right. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Well, see, you're becoming a fan favorite. People like you.
Yes.
You give great knowledge every time you come on the show and at our talk. So we thought, let's see how you do talking about the news. Now, Antonio, you've been on the program. Antonio Garcia Martinez.
That's not the worst anglicization of my name that's ever happened.
Yeah, I'm just... and so it begins. And
sorry, was that a troll? All right.
Here we go. It's starting already. We're 30 seconds in. No, Antonio is on the program. Everybody knows he wrote Chaos Monkeys, a great book, Obscene Fortune and Random Failure in Silicon Valley. He's quite successful, but he's kind of playing the... You're kind of playing the Michael Wolff card of like failure.
Shutter, yeah.
But like, oh my God, I'm such a complete utter mess. And here's what I learned in your memoir, Chaos Monkeys, which is a memoir about a certain portion of your life. Right. You wrote, what did it come out, 2 years ago now?
It came out about a year and a half, yeah.
Year and a half, you were on the program. People loved when you were on the program. Did you get good feedback on it? Or?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, good. And then, of course, we follow each other now.
Right.
And we break each other's chops.
A little bit. So people think we're antagonistic, but when I think the last time people were like, we got into it, I was saying, hey, listen, I think anybody could be an angel investor, and you're like, coal miners can't be angel investors. Oh, right.
Did he use that accent?
That's like my grumpy accent for like social media grumpness, but that was, I thought, like a pretty good back and forth, and I was like, actually, I think that you are being unfair to coal miners. Why would they not be able to move up in the world? What makes you think? Why do you think so lowly of the working class man, Antonio?
I think why it pissed me off actually is because you were actually much more candid in your book and less optimistic than you were on Twitter, and it just seemed like a weird discrepancy between your public persona and then.
Oh, I see.
Because I read the intro to your book, and in the intro to your book, you're actually very frank about actually.
Yeah, how hard it is. It's gambling. Right. Yeah. I mean, there is a massive amount of risk. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to try to get my book tone and my social tone more in line for you, Antonio. But really, the story of the moment has been Russia and Facebook. What a mess. And Antonio, it's great to have you here because you just penned a story about this. And you worked on things like custom audiences.
Correct.
And you have been watching this whole thing unfold. But in fact, you were at Facebook in the lead up to this.
Right.
When you were at Facebook, let me just start with this. Explain to the audience what you were working on generally. And if you were at that time aware of the aspirations of Facebook to sell political ads. Forget about Russians, because obviously they didn't aspire to have the platform hacked. Right. But they did aspire to get politicians to spend money on the platform.
Right. Yeah. So as background, in the most random and haphazard way possible, I was hired as Facebook's first product manager of ads targeting. Back when Facebook ads team was about 25, 30 people, had maybe 5 or 6 PMs, of which I was randomly one. Long story how I got there. First half of Chaos Monkeys, I'll tell you a story. Anyhow, and the goal was to turn data into money, turn your personal data into money. That was my mandate, by whatever means necessary. And we spent about a year trying to turn Facebook data into money, not very successfully. It turns out a lot of Facebook data isn't terribly valuable. And then we spent the year after, the year of the IPO, basically building the data bridges, what you call the custom audiences for the viewers who don't know what that means. That's basically the tunnel underneath the walled garden that is Facebook that actually joins you to all the other consumer and targeting data that exists in the rest of the world. And so
the tunnel, I like that.
The tunnel, right? So we built. I was the PM for the first versions of those tunnels.
What's an example of where that tunnel might lead?
Well, so you know how you browse the internet and then instantly something inside your feed reflects the fact of your outside behavior.
Your Facebook feed.
Your Facebook feed, right?
Right.
Or you buy something even in a physical store, then that's what that tunnel means.
How does it get from me buying something in a physical store to Facebook?
Right. So, if you use a discount card, your Safeway card is keyed to your phone number or your REI card, not accidentally, because they literally, I described it in the piece, the marketer will literally upload a file. Like I'm literally speaking like a spreadsheet with like column name, phone number, address, all the pieces of PII. And then Facebook goes down a
Would you say PAI?
PII, sorry, person identifiable information. That's trade speak for the stuff you don't want leaking out. And then it's all hashed, so it happens in hash space, which is a detail that doesn't really matter. Point being, the outside company, REI, say, or whoever, will then join to Facebook, and then that join is sort of permanent, basically irrevocable, and follows you on any device that you use Facebook on, is the magical thing. So Facebook has this magic, unique ID that's your entire digital experience, and everyone basically joins to it however they can.
Right. And so to give people an idea of why this is important, we, as an example here, will take our list of angel investors, we'll upload their email addresses to Facebook. Facebook doesn't get the email addresses. They get a hash of them, a unique code that is made from the email address that then connects it to their Facebook profile, hopefully. And then we could show them ads, and then they could even show those ads. We could even see people who Facebook determines are similar to them. And all of a sudden, this has changed our business, where we now, for something like the Angel University, I think we spend about $150 to sell a ticket to it, and we get people who might not otherwise remember we're doing it. We send them an email, they don't remember, but they see the ad 3 times on Instagram and Facebook, and they remember, and then they go buy it. Right,
and people socially, like one of the products you're touching on is called lookalike audiences, which I mentioned, and it's one of the least known and actually most powerful and popular tools in the ads arsenal. All that personal data, who you interact with, your likes or comments, none of that's actually useful for ads targeting. Where it actually works out is it allows Facebook to figure out who's like you. And so that one way to picture it is, this is maybe kind of a slightly gross metaphor. Imagine a petri dish, right? And you're inside this social network petri dish. Custom audiences allows the advertiser to plant a little bacterium inside that petri dish. And then if you engage with it, you'll spread it out around you. But lookalike audiences basically pushes it out to everyone to the limits of your sort of social petri dish and overruns that entire social network. Because Facebook knows who you know. And by the way, this is all these conspiracy theories about Facebook listening to your phone, which by the way are totally false. A lot of these come from lookalike audiences. Like, I was talking to my girlfriend about cat food or something, and then we saw a cat food ad. It's like, well, no, she went browsing for it, and you saw the ad because obviously you interact on Facebook
that
a
makes
lot.
Total sense.
And so that's
Facebook doesn't need to turn your microphone on to get more information. They have, like you said, there's too much data and not enough data for this to all make sense. So Clara, when you hear this and then you look at what's happened publicly, I don't know, are you following the Russian stuff?
Too much.
Me too. Like, are you obsessed like me, where you wake up in the morning and you search for Mueller, and you go to bed and you search for Mueller?
Yes.
You see, I thought I was the only person. This is why you and I get along.
I think a lot of people do. Or it's always the first thing that shows up on New York Times. You get push notifications from all the news feeds. I mean, I think the thing as a layperson when I read this information is, what's very clear to me is that so little of the challenge is actually with the advertising. So I know, the controversy generally is that, what has Facebook and platforms like it done to facilitate Russian meddling in our election? And what I worry about is, you hear coming down the pipeline that there is regulation coming for the advertisements to treat them more generally, especially around political issues, treating them more like the advertisements you see on television for politicians. Totally makes sense. But it sounds like, at least as far as I can tell as a layperson, the big problems were with content that was generated on the platform. And I wonder how folks who've worked on platforms like this and how you think about these issues, because frankly, I don't even know where to begin.
That is an interesting point, because what got lost in all of this is and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Antonio, because you've been following this as well, Facebook made a series of critical errors in addressing this problem. Number one, they didn't catch it early. Number two, Zuckerberg said the stupidest thing possible, which is, it's laughable that anybody thinks
that was idiotic. Yeah, that was
the most idiotic,
one of the stupidest things ever done. Yeah,
super clueless. Like literally everybody smacked their face palm. Like 10,000 people at the Facebook campus smacked their heads.
The entire DC office, which is hundreds of salespeople, it's like,
because he said,
all we've been saying for the past year is, in fact, Facebook can hand you the election. What are you talking about?
Because he literally said it's laughable to think that Facebook could swing an election.
Right.
When in fact they had a sales team, which was my earlier question, Antonio. There was an office in D.C. with hundreds of salespeople going to Congress members, senators, governors, mayors, and saying, let us help you win.
That's right.
Our platform is better than TV ads.
Right.
How did that occur? Is that because Zuck simply made a mistake, which is a possibility, or he's just not in touch with what's happening at Facebook on a day-to-day basis?
I hate to criticize my former boss and someone who's obviously been phenomenal leadership, and I call him a genius.
And made you rich.
Well, not by the standards of the city, and it doesn't matter. Point being, he's obviously...
If you were rich, if you didn't live in San Francisco. If you lived in Austin, you'd be rich.
Yeah, I mean, it's a race to the bottom on that one, but okay. But and obviously he's a brilliant leader. I call him a genius in my book. I mean, I think but I do think that he doesn't think about ads and money as much as, I think a typical CEO in some sort of, it'd be the equivalent of, say, the CEO of Boeing not knowing how airlines work, right? Or like Bezos never having walked into a bookstore, right? It'd be like, how is that possible? But it is the case that I think, at least at the time, Zuck didn't take a big interest in money or ads.
The truth is, early on, he said in the beginning of Facebook, he hated ads.
Right.
So people thought like it will never be a big business because he hates ads.
Well, no, but he just got good people. He got Cheryl to run, right? If Cheryl runs the ads business and Boz and a bunch of other people.
Well, I mean, Cheryl Cheryl Sandberg had run the largest previous ad network.
Right, and they do a very good job, obviously.
You think it's just him being clueless about it, or just not keyed into it, whatever?
I think so, yeah. And also, I mean, to get back to your earlier question about what was it like back in the day? So I was the PM for ads targeting in 2012, the last election. And one of the side things I did was actually, I also ran the team, Facebook was so random back then, what's called ads quality. So the team that actually polices ads, a team that is now busily running around trying to shut down the Russians effectively. And it was that a concern at the time? If you had asked me at the time that, Russian agents in the employ of the Kremlin would use Facebook ads to overthrow American democracy, I would have thought you were crazy. Like it was not even remotely on the radar screen. We were worrying about like iPad scammers in Turkey who would target people. If you remember those ads on the right saying,
get a free iPad.
Get a free iPad, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The politics thing at the time, this is a while ago, but still, just was not on the horizon.
But I think that's the challenge, and something that we encounter with a lot of entrepreneurs is they don't think about the implications of the technologies that they're building. And certainly when you're like moving quickly and trying to get something off the ground, that's understandable. But by the time you're at a place where you're implementing an ads team, like you should be thinking about these things. And I wonder, I think you wrote a piece recently about what Silicon Valley could learn from Microsoft. And I wonder what lessons there are from larger technology companies from previous generations that we as investors or pundits in the space can kind of help educate entrepreneurs. Like you should be asking these questions because maybe you think it's bananas now, but in 2 years, something completely unexpected might happen with your product.
Okay, so wait, when we get back from this quick break, I want you to address exactly that. What can we learn from the disaster that has been Facebook's last 2 years? And let me take a moment to tell you about the Black Tux. If you're having a wedding or an event, you need to wear a suit or a tuxedo. Obviously, you don't want to show up like a hipster in a dirty T-shirt and suspenders and a really messy beard. You want to show up looking crisp and tight with a black tuxedo. And black tuxedo, theblacktux.com is your answer. Yes, go ahead and visit theblacktux.com. High-quality rental suits and tuxedos ordered online and delivered to your doorstep. You can create your look or choose from tons of stylist-selected outfits. Suits usually retail for $1,200, and at the Black Tux, they start at just $95. Expert custom care has your back every step of the way, and you get a free home try-on. You can see the fit and the feel and the quality of the suit months before your event. After ordering, your suit will arrive 14 days before your event. If anything is less than perfect, the Black Tux will send you a free replacement right away. So you have plenty of time, no agita, no anxiety, easy peasy, and for a great price. When the event's over, you drop your rental back in the mail. Shipping is free both ways. Save time, save money. This is what direct-to-consumer is all about. And you will get $20 off your purchase if you visit theblacktux.com/twist. theblacktux.com/TWIST. That's theblacktux.com/twist for $20 off your purchase. All right, let's get back to this episode. How's that for an ad read? Did you like it, Antonio? What'd you think?
The what? Sorry.
The ad read. What'd you think? Grade my ad read. 1 to 10.
I'm going to go out and get a tux right now and just wear it around.
Exactly. You and I should get tuxes and just go out.
Yeah, just
go to the Battery.
I could wear a tux.
I don't know. You know, that's interesting. I wonder if the Black Tux has... actually, no, there are other services that do... I just got pitched on one. Maybe you got pitched on that too, the wedding dress company?
Yeah, I met them at one of your events.
Oh, it was one of my events. Yeah, that was really interesting too, just to do wedding dresses. Okay, so when we left Antonio and Clara, we were talking about what can we learn from all this.
Right.
Is there a big lesson here in terms of Zuckerberg's I think a big reason for Zuckerberg's success has been removing friction from systems.
Right.
And one of the systems they removed friction from was ads. In other words, you could place an ad super fast, super easy, even with a one click. I don't know if you worked on like what I'll call the consumer version of ads, which is you're seeing your ad and it says promote this, click here.
Right. Yeah, no, I didn't. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Spend $25. They literally made it like 2 clicks to spend money on ads. Yeah. What can we learn from the disastrous 2 years that Facebook has had in not policing their ad system and it running amok?
Right. I mean, obviously the political thing needs to be shut down. They need to get a lot more mature about how they actually police political ads. And they can do that. I mean,
you mean just shut it down?
Well, no, it's regular. Like what they're doing now, they're going to mail you a postcard if you're a political advertiser to make sure that you actually at the address that you claim to be at and that sort of thing. I mean,
okay, so you place an ad, they have a cooling off period, they send you a postcard, you get a 4-digit code like Nextdoor does to prove you have that residence.
I'm not sure the mechanics, but yeah, they're basically trying to prove.
Yeah, that was Nextdoor's big thing, I think. Know your address.
I mean, yeah, you have to know your customers like a financial firm. You can't just not know who these people are. I mean, to Clara's point, right? Like they're a mature company now, right? I think at some point. Facebook's lobby group had actually got an exemption from themselves from the Federal Election Campaign Act, FECA.
Oh, great.
Right, saying, oh, well, you're a startup, you don't need to follow. But of course, that's insane, right? I mean, it's not legal for Russians to just buy TV ads on Super Bowl and like promote a certain political candidate. And there's no reason why it should be legal on Facebook and not, elsewhere, right? And so
that's the thing. There's just such a level of naivete amongst young people today where they're like, Clara, people seem to believe if you can technically do something, then it's legal.
Right.
It's almost like the test is no longer the law.
Right.
The test is technical feasibility or the likelihood that you're caught.
Right.
Is this weird?
I think that's part of it, but also I think this idea of refereeing content makes people really uncomfortable, and I think you see that across a variety of platforms, not just Facebook, but Instagram or Twitter. Like being an arbiter of like what is true or not is something that I think these platforms have actively looked to avoid doing, and so that's why I think there's still some content on Instagram, for example, from some of these Russian actors because it isn't technically violating their code of conduct. And so I wonder about things like this. Like at some point, are these platforms going to evolve and instead of saying like, whatever you want, put it out there, this is your space to just put whatever in the world, to sort of saying like, no, there's a framework that you need to kind of adhere to. I don't know. I don't even know how these platforms would begin to enforce it, but I do think you're going to start to see people ask for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's in one of my pieces, I call it the algorithmic pass. For the past 20 years, going back all the way to Google, these companies have gotten away with the excuses like, look, we're not editing anything. We're just optimizing to some metric, whether it be click-through rate or engagement, and we just give you what you want.
Right.
And we're basically intermediaries, and we have no editorship or responsibility. We're a tech company, we're not a media company. But I think, as you said, I think people are just revoking that pass and saying, sorry, you are now the front page editor to the world, Mark Zuckerberg. You have to adopt some of that responsibility.
And I think it's fair because if you think about it, if you're making your money from advertising, you're paying content providers through revenue split, and consumers are spending that amount of time on your platform, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. How do you not describe it as a media business? Just because you're not creating all the media doesn't mean you're not a media business. Listen, Netflix has to rise and fall with the behavior of the people on their platform. And there's been bad behavior that has resulted in people being banned from the Netflix platform. Right. There is bad behavior on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube is one of the ones that seems to have gotten a massive pass. I don't understand how YouTube, and I think this is coming to a close, and I've told Susan Wojcicki straight up, like, you got to get control of this because people are climbing up buildings and cranes illegally, hanging off of them, and I'm seeing an ad for Nestle, and hot chocolate before an ad of somebody hanging off a building. You're basically allowing people to do stunts that would never be permissible on TV. Like Discovery Channel, no matter how crazy these people are, they would never allow people to do that. They would take a certain amount of responsibility. And then this all culminated with the pranks genre, which they're now, I think just last week or this week, decided they would start to roll back your ability to do pranks. Because these dipshits, these dip beeps.
Oh, they're great videos, but yeah, you're right.
Where do you see this one? In London, these guys who have a prank channel, one of these idiots decided to put a plastic tube in his mouth, put cement into a microwave, stick his head into the microwave, cement his head, and then breathe through the tube. It started drying quicker than they thought, and they didn't realize that, like, maybe it would start compressing and crush his skull. So he's breathing, but his skull is slowly being crushed by the cement getting hard. So they call the fire department. The fire department's there, and they have it all on video, and they're monetizing the videos. So they're monetizing a suicide attempt or a Darwinian suicide attempt. And those police officers and firefighters cannot go to another scene. They literally just stopped banning that today. But it's a level of insanity because they're not only, by not kicking them off and letting them monetize, they're endorsing.
Right.
It seems.
But how do you enforce it, right? Which is, I think, your objection at scale. How do you actually enforce that?
There it is. Look at this picture. I mean, this for the people who are watching at home on the video. If you're not watching the video, go ahead and take a look. I mean, here is a dipshit in a uniform, and they're literally, that's a fireman's arm taking apart before this person dies.
So when the microwave came off, is it just like an ice cube around the guy's head of concrete?
No, I think they had to chisel or break the concrete as well. So they're trying to figure out with like a huge saw, are we going to cut this guy's head in half, or are we going to cut the cement in half? But this is just the tip of the iceberg.
So why a microwave?
What
was the microwave supposed to do?
Microwaves seem to be a good place to pour. I guess they had nowhere to pour the concrete. So like, oh, well, I have this whole microwave.
No, ice cube trays don't come that big.
I mean, you're asking for logic from a group of people who think that this is a wise idea, Antonio. Let's just be honest. There's nothing smart about this. But people have gotten to pass. That's got to end, right?
Totally. I mean, I think you have to weigh the fact that these platforms are empowering a lot of people who should have a voice to communicate with people who they're not necessarily immediately connected to. And I hope that doesn't go away. But being realistic, like these platforms, just like you said, they are the front page for basically everybody now. And so being a little bit more sophisticated about how you police that is the responsible thing to do.
And Twitter hasn't grown tremendously, but they do have Trump. But it seems since there's such a smaller scale, 10% of the size of the sort of Facebook overall audience globally, they kind of get a pass, right? Because they're not that relevant. Is that your perception?
Well, also they allow anonymous accounts. They don't actually have real identity, which I think to me is a mistake. But
that's got to change. The idea of using, would you change that?
I would. Yeah.
That's been my suggestion for a couple of years now. Would you change that on Twitter, or not allow anonymous accounts or pseudonyms?
I think that's fair. I think, everybody's on it, and the amount of nonsense that just people I know in my regular life have experienced just by sort of putting themselves out there is really scary. I mean, last time I saw you, you said you weren't going to go on Twitter anymore. Have you stepped on that?
No, it's not working.
No?
It's not working. Until this Mueller thing is worked out one way or the other.
Oh my God, why are you so into that story?
I am obsessed with it because...
Why?
I love my favorite films are like 3 Days with the Condor, Manchurian Candidate. I'm into this. I'm into political thrillers. It's like one of my favorite genres.
You're into the aesthetics of it, but do you think it's actually politically important? That was part of what my Wired piece is around. I'm so ticked off that everyone thinks it's so important.
I'll tell you what. Yes, I do think it's important. I'll tell you why. I think that whatever we know is probably a small portion of the truth to start.
Okay.
I believe that while they probably didn't swing the election, it's probable that they did swing a couple of states, or could. Whether they did it this time or they could do it next time, because it was a small number of votes. And so we have to get our hands around this. And if Trump's position was, and the White House's position, I should say, was this happened, it probably wasn't material, but who knows, it could have been. And we're all Americans, we want to get it right. I would be like, okay, I'm not interested in reading the Mueller probe, but when you see the cover-up and him saying there was no obstruction, there was no collusion, and then Mueller just keeps releasing more and more information, it leads me to believe, and I have watched every political thriller of the last 40 years of note that's got 3 stars or more, so I am an expert on the subject. It leads me to believe that there is going to be some dramatic stuff that comes out. I believe in the P-tape. I believe that Trump is compromised. I believe that 2/3 of the apartments in some of his places were bought by Russians, and that he is dirty from top to bottom.
I think that's totally fair for me
Would
personally.
Would you believe that too?
I wouldn't put it past them, but I think for me personally, the reason I do think it's important, I mean, these 13 Russian nationals they've been indicted, but they're not going to be arrested. I mean, maybe their travel will be circumscribed somewhat, if they try to leave the country. But for me, it's more like putting it out there makes it clear that this wasn't a hoax. And I think that anything you can do to further confirm for the American public this is real. Like, there are these nefarious actors out there who are taking like crazily specific steps to meddle I think is helpful for the public dialogue.
Right, because Trump is specifically telling his constituent, which is a third of the country that won the election for him, that it's not true.
Right.
So wait, Antonio, you're saying it's not important? You don't believe that it happened?
No.
You think it's not important?
I believe
Explain your
no,
position.
it obviously happened. I think it's a sign of what could happen. It's a portent that if Facebook doesn't crack down or the government doesn't force Facebook to crack down, it could be a big deal. If you're actually asking the question, did they throw the election? No, I think the answer is a resounding no. The numbers just aren't there. Their campaign was too small. The whole thing sucked.
Well, we don't
Hold
know.
on a second.
We
don't
won't
know that yet.
Oh, $100,000 in political ad spend. You think that actually changed?
Well, I
anything?
think that's the point, and that's been Facebook's argument that it was, they've really focused all of the attention on this idea of the advertising, when in fact the majority of the interventions have been not through the advertising channel at all. And so until we have more information about it, I don't think you can say one way or the other.
I think you're right. So here's the thing, Clara. Wait, hold on. I got to get to Clara's point, then I'll let you follow up here, which is, what if groups was the better function, and just doing a little bit of sprinkling of groups to get those going, and then they get covered by the press, which is not Facebook's fault, but it was the origin story of that fight, was that multiple groups were created to fight by Russian operatives. They probably figured out earned media, which is the unpaid. They probably did a little bit of paid and then quickly realized, wow, we could just earn this media. We don't even have to pay. We just get a couple of fake accounts. We do a couple of events. We get all these people to like stuff that's not true. I don't know if you saw CNN interviewed like everybody's crazy aunt in Florida.
Yeah.
And it's like, I tweeted it like, everybody's crazy aunt is now at the center of this. And she's like, I don't know any Russians. I don't read the Russians. I'm not a Ruski. And that's ridiculous. Hogwash. That is hogwash. Get off my property before I spray you with the hose. And you're like, oh my God, that's my aunt. My great aunt who like literally forwards everything that Hillary Clinton is raping kids in Pizzagate in the basement of pizzerias. Like, that's who's at the center of this. And the Russians figured out. You don't think $12 million in social media could create an impact in a state or a city where only 100,000 votes or 50,000 votes made the difference?
So I did some back of the envelope calculations on Twitter. And if you believe the numbers that Facebook released, then they're the only numbers we have to go on. And if you don't, we have nothing to talk about. If we assume that, they calculated, and my order of magnitude came to about the same number, 0.004% of election content over that 1 year period emanated from groups or pages they identified as being controlled from the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, which is what we're talking about when we say the Russians. 0.004%.
Of the pages?
Just election content in the U.S. on average, which, again, it's a national average. It might have been higher in certain localities. But if you actually unwrap that number, that's about 1 in 30,000-ish posts. The average Facebook user sees about 100 posts a day of order, right? More like 100 to 200. So that means you'd have to tune into Facebook, on average, again, over the entire United States, about half a year to see one Russian post.
Unless they were going after very targeted through the same software you built,
right,
that you are responsible for, Antonio.
Among others.
Among others, custom audiences.
Let's spread a little blame here.
Let me zone in on your culpability, Antonio. What if they had the voter rolls that had been hacked or stolen or given to them by Cambrian Analytica, previously owned by Steve Bannon,
or the RNC,
and the RNC stole, or our friend Julian Assange, who works for the KGB apparently. What if Julian Assange, maybe, who knows?
Going deep on the X-Files nature.
Who knows? Okay. Who knows who Julian Assange works for?
Okay.
But let's say he hacked some stuff.
Okay.
And they knew who the voters were who came out for Obama, and they made a custom audience of just those people and their lookalike friends.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you targeted just that group of people. And instead of talking about the number of posts, which I think is a red herring by you Facebook people, and then you talked about who they targeted and how they targeted specific people.
Right.
That's the card that needs to turn over in this poker game.
Okay.
What do you think, Clara?
I think you both make really interesting points, but ultimately, it's impossible to know certainly one way or the other without having more information. And I think that's ultimately what this whole conversation boils down to. And obviously,
we need more info.
We need more information. And like I am, to a hammer everything is a nail. We are a fund that invests in highly regulated companies. So in my opinion, these companies need to be regulated. We need to have access to this information because ultimately, like us sitting around a table speculating while it's fascinating is ultimately like doesn't mean anything.
So a VC calling for more regulation.
Yeah,
this is interesting.
Hold on a second. I want to just make a point that the idle speculation of this show is critically important.
No, totally. I think
Do you realize there's 150,000 people who tune in every week to this? Ridiculous speculation. I love speculation. You know what I like about speculation?
Ridiculous. I just said it's, ultimately.
Here's the thing
fruitless.
about speculation that I think is great. Speculation has been derided like, oh, don't speculate. Speculation is how detectives figure out and solve murder cases. I have
Informed speculation.
Okay, but I have watched a lot of Law and Order, and I will have you know I've watched every.
A law degree.
I have watched every Columbo episode, and I'm on my second watching of many.
Okay.
And just one more thing there, ma'am. You said that you placed a custom audience, but did you click the lookalike audience there when you were doing that when you were the Florida thing where you had the Russians and the tiki torches? Anyway, you were going to say.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you believe that, then explain to me, what magic wand the Russians have, given they're up against dueling armies with almost 9-figure budgets, right? Literally like hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on Facebook.
Yeah.
What magic wand, what superpowers do the Russians have that evidently the best American marketers don't have?
I'll tell you.
I mean, if you could win an election with 90 Russians speaking poor English with shitty memes,
I'll give it to you in 2 seconds.
Okay.
I'll give it to you in 2 seconds. It's very simple. There are things that they would say that are so patently false and offensive that no political campaign could put their name on it. There is a
Did you see some of these posts?
Right.
Jesus Christ, arm wrestling Satan and saying press like so Jesus wins. You think that's the zinger? That's the thing that
No,
Trump
but it could be Hillary is corrupt, and there are things that there are ads, I'm sure, and we'll get all these ads are going to be released at some point, right?
Right.
And when we look at those ads, my money is on a lot of those ads are ads that are so offensive and or so untrue that a political party or a political action committee would not want to put their names on them for fear of being sued. So they could actually operate outside on the creative basis of the ads where people wouldn't. Also, no political party would ever send, I don't believe this would be really deep state crazy, or not deep state, it would be really sinister, people to go to a march who are pro and for Donald Trump to create chaos. And I think Putin's pure goal here was not to get Trump elected. His pure goal was to create chaos and to destabilize democracy.
Which is Rob Goldman's point in the tweet.
Yes.
Which is one of the news items of this week.
Rob Goldman, who...
VP of Ads.
VP of Ads, who is a smart cat.
His former colleague who got retweeted by Trump, which is not something that happens every day. It's like, oh, look, suddenly he's famous.
What do you think Putin's goal is, Clara? You're up on the... You and Putin are so tight, I'm sure.
Yeah, super
I only know one person who knows Putin.
Who?
Shervin Pishovar.
Oh, I'm not surprised. Okay.
He posted to Facebook like himself at a meeting with Putin. And I was like, not a good look. Putin murders, kills, tortures,
Polonium
poisons.
tea. Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever read Red Notice, like, this is a person who murders and kills his rivals, journalists, religious people, anybody.
Right.
And you're like, I saw Shervin like, oh my God, Putin called on me during this roundtable discussion. I'm like, oh,
not a good thing.
I mean, if Hitler or Stalin or whoever, I mean, Pol Pot calls on you, I don't think it's like
Godwin's law applies to even this podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when you're at a roundtable with a Hitler level person, like, I mean, Putin might be considered that, right? Like, I mean, he hasn't killed as many people, but he definitely has changed the fate of a lot of people's lives in a negative way. Yeah, certainly
so you're saying
not
if
Hitler.
you want to be an LP in your fund, you'd say no. Is that what you're saying?
I just thought it was a crazy, insane, clueless thing to do, to send a picture of yourself with Putin.
Yeah.
I think that's representative of the lot of the responses from the tech community to these issues, whether it's that tweet from this past week or series of tweets or the response of many of these companies. It just kind of was dumb or tone deaf or just not sort of understanding the larger global context in which these firms are operating now. So
you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think the tweet, I mean, I think
Rob would take it back.
Rob, I think, was right. But I think, to what you're saying, I think also the public perception of what he was saying is part of the reason why I wrote the post. Because he's got all this state and all the numbers rattling around in his head, and he understands the size of the Russians' real impact on the election.
But some people say he's right, and some people say he was actively obfuscating the larger context in which Facebook was operating, which is like, you're going to just tweet about advertising when in fact it's like it bleeds through to the whole business. Right. And so you just doing a tweet about advertising is in fact, if not actively lying, then at least being really shady. And I'm not saying that he was, but I'm saying that the perception of that is
I know
fair.
Rob, and he's a smart cat, and I consider him like we're kind of friendly. Known each other for 10 years or more. We knew each other in LA. I'm trying to remember what his startup was before. But he was not, he's leaving out the fact that the high art of Facebook is to make content, spend a little bit on ads to get the virality going, and then let virality take it from there.
Right.
That is what people do.
Right. That was one of the key things in the piece that came out today that I got a little wonky there. Like, how does the ads auction work?
Right.
I think people don't, not to harp on the ad, I mean, you're absolutely right that the organic side is also important, but I think, the point is that whether it's on the ad side or whether it's the organic side, what Jason said, engagement is the key thing. Trump actually supposedly had a smaller media budget than Hillary, but he totally took over Facebook, right? That's because if you drive huge engagement, not only do you get the free distribution you're talking about, you actually also pay on average less for media, because the Facebook's model assumes your sort of bid for the auction is higher. And anyhow, point being, you can actually clear the market for much less if you drive that.
This is a core issue, is it not, Clara, that spreading lies or saying things that are less truthy and more outrageous feed clickbait. People are more likely to click on something that is outrageous or ridiculous, less truthy. People are more likely to comment on it. Therefore, the entire world, from BuzzFeed and Gawker and everybody else, has just said, what's the worst spin or most ridiculous, horrific spin I can put on this so that I get more clicks?
Should we just quit Facebook?
I don't know. I mean, I think Facebook is in trouble for two reasons. I mean, I'm going to ask you what impact this has on their business. For me, this is becoming an existential threat to the company, because I believe they could be kicked out of certain countries, smaller ones, who don't want to deal with this nonsense anymore, or they could be regulated in their ad network to a level of requiring social security numbers and photo IDs that could slow down growth. And number three, I don't think that any regulator would ever let them buy WhatsApp or Instagram again, given how they've responded to this. When we get back, I want to have your reaction to, is this going to be, are we at peak Facebook now, and then this starts the decline when we get back on This Week in Startups? Let me take a moment to thank my friend Jamie Siminoff for inviting me to invest in Ring, and an investment that I missed, and I bang my head against the wall every day, because Jamie Siminoff is a brilliant founder who created Ring, which I use every day, and it is working brilliantly. Here's a video of an insane person stealing packages, about to go into a pickup truck, and the person who had this Ring yelled, "Hey, put my package down!" And I think this might have been one of those great bait packages. But the fact is, your community will be safe, or at least much safer, if you put Ring doorbells everywhere. So your job after hearing this is to tell everybody in your community to put Ring on their doors, and you will solve crime in your area. I'm probably overstating that just a bit, but it's true that Ring has reduced crime, and specifically stealing of packages. When somebody's going to rob your house, what's the first thing they do? They knock on the door. Is anybody home? Hey, can I use your phone? My car's broken down, whatever it is. They case the joint. That's why casing the joint exists as a phrase in the world. And casing the joint means you knock on the door, you ring the bell. When they see a Ring doorbell with a camera facing them, and then you answer it on your smartphone when you're in Bali or wherever you are.
As one does. Answer your doorbell in Bali, of course.
That's what Antonio and I were doing last week. We're having pina coladas. Both of our doorbells rang. We both answered, said, leave the package there. Right? Yeah. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Get your Ring and avoid people stealing or breaking into your house, and have the delightful experience of every single person who rings your doorbell being recorded for all history. That's another feature people don't realize. And what other people don't realize is you can install this thing yourself. Putting a doorbell in, you don't need to hire a bunch of people to do it. You just pop open the instructions, you install it yourself. I've done it 3 or 4 times. I give it away as a gift to all my friends. Ring is brilliant. And I have something new, the floodlight camera, which is something I always wanted. You know, you get a house, you have a compound like Antonio has, you get a bunch of floodlights around it.
I have a Ring on the compound, actually.
You do have a Ring. I know.
I own a Ring, yeah. I need to get it solar powered.
On the Garcia compound.
Right.
You can just have the floodlight go off, and it sends you an alert and record it on video. I love the new Ring floodlight cam, spotlight cam, all these great cameras. Oh boy, they're amazing. I want you to here's your call to action. This is the most important part. I want you to go to ring.com/twist. That's ring.com/twist, TWIST. And you will save up to $150 on a Ring of Security kit. Yes, get the Ring of Security kit, and you'll get all the great Ring products. And you will save up to $150. Go to ring.com/twist, ring.com/twist. And if you're listening to this program and you've already bought the Ring, I want you to say thank you at Ring for supporting at TWI Startups. So just go ahead and thank them on your Twitter. They love to see that support. It lets them know people are listening. Is this going to be the end of Facebook, Antonio? Is this going to be the start of the decline? Because people are now really hating Facebook. I mean, even Jim Carrey. Even Jim Carrey has said he sold his Facebook stock.
Canary in the cage.
That is, if anything's the canary in the coal mine, it's Jim Carrey saying he sold his Facebook stock. He called his money manager. He said, how much Facebook do you own? He's told me he owns 17 million or something like that. I think it's 1% of his Jim Carrey's $1 billion net worth. And he sold his Facebook, he said, and he deleted his account. Is this the beginning of the end, or will they figure this out? What's your take as somebody who worked there and created this market?
No, I think it's definitely. I think it's definitely rattled the company in a big way. I think the piece that Nicholas Thompson wrote in Wired that came out last week.
Oh boy,
is really good. It's an amazing piece. It's incredible. You actually managed to get 50 sources because Facebook is a famously tough place to crack. Because
Do you think they allowed them to get those 50 sources because they figured let's take our punishment and then we can go after the punishment to the redemption phase?
Doesn't smell to me like Facebook's playbook. No, I think there's just a lot of internal turmoil, and people are really pissed off at what happened in the election.
People internally.
Oh yeah.
Do you regret your time there and your having helped build this? Do you sometimes think I should have done more to point this out, or do you just think we couldn't have known?
Yeah.
You sleep well at night?
No, but for other reasons. No. I think it's fine. I mean, the inevitability of technology is the last argument of every techno-optimist, right? And this would have happened at some point, whether I had done it or not. Of course, you could say that true of, drug traffickers would make the same argument. So, I don't know. At the time, we didn't have that long-term. We didn't think it would be used for politics.
Well, you were a bunch of kids, right?
We didn't think it would destroy the Western Enlightenment and Western civilization as we know it, which I think it is actually. But yeah.
You sincerely do. You're not being facetious.
Oh no, absolutely. That might even be my next book. Yeah, no, I really do think so actually. Yeah. Anyways.
And what do you think the core?
I mean, one of many factors, not just Facebook.
But what do you think the core? What's been lost? What have we lost?
Truth. The notion of objective truth. That's what came out of the Gutenberg Revolution and the Enlightenment. Look something up. It's in the encyclopedia. That is truth. I don't care what you say, right? What we're now calling fake news is folklore. We're returning to this tribal reality. And Facebook, to some degree, is fomenting that, right?
This is going to be a good book, kid. This is going to be better than the last one.
You think?
I think so. And the last one was great. I mean,
it'll be bigger. It'll be a bigger, yeah. But anyhow, so yeah, I think Facebook is definitely creating that reality. I mean, it's it used to be the case the citizen had a right to an opinion, and now you have a right to your own reality, right? People actually think those kids are actors. It's like how can you possibly think that for any length of time? But you do, yeah.
I mean, it is literally like Facebook is more closely aligned with InfoWars than it is with truth. The platform, the nature of it,
right? The platform, correct.
And this is where I think the philosophy of unrestricted growth and removing friction from systems is a great playbook for growth until the point at which it blows up what you've built.
But maybe it's funny. I read this piece by Josh Constantine in TechCrunch about how Facebook could actually have a pay-per-view model or like a paywall effectively, which normally I would typically discard because any network that depends on network effects will never have a charge model because it just doesn't work. Right?
Too much friction.
There's too much friction.
Take your credit card out equals
right. But you've actually dominated a market. You've basically won in the EU and the West. Maybe it's not such a bad idea actually to get rid of the ad thing and then just refocus.
I said that on CNBC. I said if you charge $10 a month because they make $27 a quarter here in the U.S. is what they made in revenue. If you charge $10 a month, then you would have the high ground to say if you don't want to be tracked at all, just give us $10 a month. $100 a year, and you're out of the tracking, and you don't have to worry about it. And so it's up to consumers. Clara, is this a existential threat to them, or is this a real threat to the core business, to shareholder value, to revenue, to Facebook's very existence?
I think it's a real threat, but I think there are like a confluence of events happening right now. I mean, even earlier in the quarter, their revenues are, the company is slowing down in terms of its growth, and part of that can be ascribed to the fact that younger people are migrating to other platforms like Instagram, which arguably is the same thing. But they're moving to other channels. I think this is called a business reaching maturity, and I think a lot of things change, and how you respond really determines what happens next. And I think Microsoft, as I mentioned earlier, is a really great and inspiring example.
What is it that Microsoft learned after the Internet Explorer bundling fiasco? What do you think that how they changed?
I mean, it's sophistication in terms of their messaging and their government relations strategy generally. I think it's also just changing the way their business was staffed and how, what was focused upon. I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but it's definitely I think they would all admit it's a different business than it was back then.
Yeah, more adults, less pirates.
Right. Never let Bill Gates in front of the camera again. That's for sure. That's what sunk them in the antitrust trial, which is what I know about.
If you watch those,
those are horrible to
the depositions are so hard to watch because he just argues with the lawyer and he gets into an intellectual sparring match. And he was known. I mean, he is obviously the smartest guy in the room in almost every room he enters.
Right.
And he demolished, like, the lawyer, or seemingly thought he did,
right,
which then made him look terrible to a jury.
Right. Yeah, no, I think everything that Clara said is basically right. That, you know, I think Microsoft got a lot more mature about it, and I think part of the problem here, and this is a general Silicon Valley thing, and Jason, you know better than anybody. You know, Silicon Valley people look at the government as this sort of annoying, you know, insect that maybe comes flying around and you swat it occasionally and it kind of goes away, right? They never actually understand that the people who actually have armies and navies and nuclear weapons, you know, at the end of the day, right? You know, they have the monopoly on force, and they can actually make you do anything.
But it's not just force; it's also the public interest in mind.
Sure,
and I think ultimately, a lot of the people who run these companies don't give a shit, and
Right.
or just haven't taken the time to think about it. And if they did, they might feel differently. And I think that's good. You know, I wish there was more of that.
Yeah, it is the underlying tension, I think, as an investor that has existed for the last 2 decades, which is, if you invest in people who are marauding pirates, you know, take no prisoners, Zuckerberg-like people, you will have a great outcome. But the outcome may then not be good for society. And this balance of what's good for society and how fast something grows. I mean, the fact that Uber grew as fast as it did has been great for me on a personal net worth basis. It has not been great for me on a reputation business, because as great as it is to be the third or fourth investor in Uber, I also have to deal with, oh, you invested in Uber? F you. You know, like, I wear an Uber hat, and, like, it's 50-50. Like, sometimes people are like, oh, right on. And people are like, oh, you invested in Uber? F you. You know, like, that really pisses people off.
Yeah. Huh.
People are pretty vocal about, during that period of time, and I guess rightfully so, some of the behavior was not to the liking of all people, but it was also, if you want to grow, ignoring everything but growth is a great strategy.
Right. I mean, the problem is, I think, is that you can reframe that, what you said about, you know, taking the social interest into account. You can reframe that as the mission of the company, right? Inside Facebook, which is fairly cult-like, a more open and connected world was the mission, and they only ever imagined the sort of good things that would come out of what they're doing, and they just either were selectively blind or just didn't have the imagination to imagine the sort of bad things that would come out of it.
One thing that we found very interesting: nobody at Facebook, employees, management team, and even board members, came out in favor of Hillary Clinton or took a political position, with the exception of Peter Thiel, who went full pro on Trump. Do you think Zuck, Sheryl, and the entire liberal contingent at Facebook were too scared to come out in favor of Hillary publicly? Because they did not. Explain that to me if you have any insight there.
You know, I don't know. I don't.
I found that personally weird
at all. I barely know Sheryl.
Wasn't the silence deafening? Did they not want to pick a side?
Zuck not taking a side. He's not going to take a side. I could see Sheryl maybe taking a side.
I know what side
she's a very forthright person. She posts a lot of personal stuff on her feed.
Yeah.
It surprised me a little bit, but
I found that super.
But remember the scandal that broke out over trending topics, right? Supposedly, somebody had let the rumor out that the human curators were preferring liberal content, and that raised a huge kerfuffle. So that they can't take those stances, I think.
All right, let's do a quick speed round here. Crypto is next on my list of stories. Apparently, the French are cracking down. I don't know if that matters. People are laundering money. That's no shocker. Bitfunder's founder was arrested for lying to the U.S. securities regulators to avoid taking responsibility for theft by hackers. In the same day, a lawsuit accusing him and the company of running an unregistered securities exchange that defrauded users he was accused of. It still seems like crypto is a complete, utter fraud run by people who have no ability to actually release products by and large.
Would you still think that if you had bought Bitcoin at $2?
Well, here's the crazy thing. I wrote about it when it was under $1.
Okay.
My wife heard about me talking about it and bought a bunch. Did not tell me. And so now I find myself in the awkward position of having talked this down and said it's a complete fraud, and having 7 figures worth of Bitcoin. Well, I don't know, at $20,000, I think
Does she
we're
still have it?
Yes. Yeah, okay. She's hodl. She's full hodl.
Wow.
So I'm kind of benefiting, but I still have the position that this is 90% of a fraud,
right,
and 10% reality. What do you think, Clara? Are you investing in ICOs?
We haven't yet. I would never fully rule it out. But frankly, and I know we've talked about this before, we have this whole saying, you know, just going through the ICO process or engaging with the cryptocurrency space as an entrepreneur, it's like building a business within a business. And we haven't seen any companies pitch us who seem like they could really pull it off. And sometimes we actually get pitched by businesses that do sound like criminal behavior or could be used in that way. And I just think generally the space needs to get its house in order and get to a place where it is regulated. And interestingly, one of our portfolio companies, who I don't think they would mind me mentioning this, Votes, they're essentially they're a voting platform that's built on the blockchain. So they're very familiar with the space.
Seems like a great idea.
And one of their investors asked them to do an ICO.
Yeah, when is the pre-sale?
And they decided to not do it. For them, it was because they were concerned about the regulatory implications. They're already involved in the election space, which is highly regulated. And it just felt like it was going to compromise or potentially compromise their work. And so they ultimately decided not to do it.
It'd be a heck of a pitch, though.
Buy
Votes.
Yeah.
Buy Votes. Each ICO coin is a vote. Buy Votes now. I've had 3 or 4 companies that were not ICO, like Tala, Rob May's company. He did an ICO for bots. I thought it was a pretty clever idea, but you're right. Once you start down that path, it takes over your life. And he said he would do it again, but he would do it a year or 2 later.
Yeah.
Are you buying crypto, or do you think, because you're kind of an anti-establishment guy, right?
I bought a little bit at 13 back in the day, not nearly as much as I in retrospect wish I had, but I'm a little bit late to the party. To me, it all smells a little bit like a solution looking for a problem to really tackle.
Yes.
But I think a lot of these blockchain applications, like the one that you just mentioned and some other ones that I've looked into, I think there I can maybe see it actually have an impact. I mean, it's weird. I usually judge an idea. An idea is not real until it gets used, for crime, basically. Until criminals use it, it's not real. And obviously, I think Bitcoin has met that hurdle. So I'm not totally skeptical about it. I do think there's a lot of enthusiasm. It's clear that a lot of the ICOs are scams. Like I've read a lot of the white papers or the businesses they're trying to disrupt, and it's like, why are you doing this again? But anyhow,
it does seem like every ICO paper is basically like, take a really successful business, put a token on it, and say it doesn't exist on one server. It's now distributed across many peers. It's peer to peer, and there's a token instead of money. And it's like, okay, the only peer to peer things that have ever worked in history, BitTorrent, Napster, are still underground. There's no other peer to peer. Product, right? Is there a peer-to-peer mainstream product? I don't know. Like, that's what Travis tried to do with Red Swoosh. He tried to take Scour and then make it a CDN. It wasn't necessary.
I think the best analogy is actually in the finance space, and I think they've been successful in that they've been able to evolve past it. But a lot of these fintech platforms, whether it's SoFi or Fundrise, it really started as like, I'm an individual, I'm going to lend to an individual, or I'm an individual and I'm going to co-invest with individuals in this product or service. But ultimately, I think what they found in order to achieve any kind of meaningful scale was, yes, we want to still engage these individuals, but maybe I'm not on both sides of the transaction. Maybe it'll be, I'm an individual, I'm getting my student loan, but I'm actually getting it from a really large bank. I just don't see it because the money is getting funneled through one of these really sophisticated tech platforms. And so I do think that, the peer-to-peer concept is valuable and sort of disrupting a lot of old ways of doing business, but I think ultimately to move it to the next level, there has to be some level of sophistication, and you are going to see a lot of the existing players, like, as much as you think you're disrupting, that tends to be, maybe that's how I'll summarize it, as much as you think you're disrupting the old players, really what you're doing is making it easier for them eventually to come in and move a bunch of stuff through that same platform.
Like, the more I read into the Bitcoin or the crypto world, the more it seems like the cult of decentralization. They decentralize everything, and in some cases it clearly makes sense. In some cases it's like, why are you doing that again? Like, one of the big news is that Walmart was going to do an experiment with IBM's blockchain technology, whatever it is, to track their mango shipments, which evidently are hard to manage for some reason. I'm like, why on earth would you need a publicly centralized mango database? Like,
an immutable blockchain.
Like
this mango from 1979 was delivered to Boise, Idaho.
Right, and it requires like an Iceland's worth of power to just do the basic data hygiene.
Yeah, you're like, I think you could use Amazon Web Services for 1 billionth of a penny to track
just
every
like
avocado forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
You don't need an immutable blockchain that is burning a hole in the ozone layer.
Exactly.
On that note, I would like to announce Jcoin. Jcoin is going to be available in the second quarter, and it's going to be a startup coin available to all investors except Americans. And for every dollar you buy, I will invest it into companies, and then I will take 20% carry on, and you can all trade it between each other. So for everybody who's made a shit ton of money doing crypto, and you're about to lose it, I am the safe haven. Join Jcoin, and you can turn your crypto virtual assets that you'll never be able to sell and will probably go to zero into actual startup funding. This previous message is not endorsed by Jason Calacanis, and it is a joke.
I was wondering, actually. I was wondering.
It sounds so good, though,
this is
doesn't
like
it?
the announcement.
It's not
Amazing.
beyond you to do it, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I think I got 3 more months of trolling, like really hard trolling on CNBC, and everybody just like, this is a complete fraud.
Yeah.
And then I just flip over. And by the way, I've solved the problem now. It's no longer a fraud.
Right.
Put
Everything
your
else
money
is a
into
fraud.
J-Coin.
Bitcoin.
No, I look at this Tezos, and I'm like, I had Tezos on the show, and they raised $200 million for nothing but a white paper. They took, I think, 10 or 20% of the money as a commission for writing the white paper. And I was like, well, I guess it, and as I told the woman on the show, I was like, well, everybody agreed to it in the document, so it would be like if we raised money for a company and there was somebody who was a banker who took 5%. I mean, not that that happens in our industry for obvious reasons, but that happens, I guess, in sales. And so, okay, everybody knew what they were doing. But I'm like, wait a second, I'm doing this professionally. I've invested in 6 unicorns. Maybe I can raise $200 million for J-Coin.
Bet you could.
Maybe I should just do this. Jay, I need a platform. Is there a way to do this without going to jail? That's the other thing I'm trying to figure out.
Has any VC done this? Like an ICO for their own fund? Like basically LPs?
I know Science did one and Brock Pierce did one. They were small. Like I think they did like $5-10 million each.
Okay.
And the core concept, which I think is interesting, is then you can trade your interest as an LP at any given point in time.
Right.
Of course, this is in the worst interest of LPs. One of the great things about funds is they make you stay in it, and the fund manager decides when to sell. And the fund manager is incented to get a big return so they can get 20 or 30% of it. Therefore, you're not selling too early.
Right.
Because almost all the big regrets in life, like I know somebody who sold half their Uber position at $4 billion or $2 billion. And literally like 6 months later, it went to 10. And then a year later, it went to 30 or 40. And they're just like, oh, can you imagine explaining to your LPs?
Right.
But you also want to keep your LPs. I mean, you usually write that language out of your LPA specifically to say you can't switch your ownership stake out.
Yeah. I think it's interesting maybe for another class of investors who might want to trade it. So like, let's say the fund starts and it hits an Uber or an Airbnb, and then that company becomes a unicorn. Well, then people may want to buy into it, and they can't buy into that fund. So they say, oh, you close your fund and nobody can get in. But imagine afterwards if people could buy into the fund.
I think that's an area where I've heard a lot of people talk about recently, not within the crypto space, but generally creating a more liquid secondary market for, LP interests or just ownership interest generally in these startups. And I mean, you're starting to see that with common shares, but not with preferred, and for understandable reasons. But I think that is perhaps a more interesting and realistic nut to crack in the short term within the investment space.
Does that incentivize shorter term thinking though? Part of that? Sorry.
Yeah, that's totally fair. But I think the challenge is, you're seeing a lot of these institutional investors who are locked up and who theoretically should be investing in the next generation of funds like mine, who who can't because
but when you went to talk to LPs, did you have the same thing where they're like, well, we have to wait until Dropbox, Airbnb, and these other people get out,
absolutely,
and then we can give more money to funds, but we're locked up. When I went to talk to major endowments, if I went to talk to major endowments at some point, they would have said to me potentially, we have to get these other positions cleared before we can start reinvesting in new funds.
It's a real problem.
There is indigestion in the system because Dropbox and Uber were investments for most of these people 6 to 10 years ago, and the companies never went public. It's like, ooh. I mean, it's an issue. Hey, speaking of another issue, NVCA, which is the National Venture Capital Association. I have no involvement with them. I've never even seen them do it. Have you been to an NVCA event?
Yeah,
or are you a member?
They did. No, I'm not a member, but they did an angel event that I went to recently. It's like for networking and things like that.
Are they based here in Silicon Valley?
I don't know.
It's not a very significant audience. A significant organization, I think, because there's no presence for them here. I've never gone to an event. It seems like a light presence. I see their content
a lot, especially through like partner. I don't know if they're partner platforms, but things like Axios. I see a lot of their statistics. Like they put a lot of research.
They do release metrics on the industry.
Yeah.
How much? That's where they're famous.
Yeah.
They release that. How much was invested? So they have just released guidelines to help firms handle sexual harassment. This includes sample policies like best practices for addressing harassment and discrimination, and code of conduct policies. Obviously, 90% of investment firm partners are still men, according to a 2016 NVCA report. Obviously, VC firms are not forced to adopt this. I don't think it's if you're a member of NVCA, these are just suggestions. One issue raised with the current docs is a suggestion removing alcohol from workplace events. Unclear how many VCs will adopt this since socializing is such a big part of the industry. What else is in this? You reviewed this or you looked at it?
I just started. I mean, they happened, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
So I've just started looking at the docs. I'm glad they're out there. I mean, for us, we went through this process and came up with our own, what we called our code of professionalism a few months ago. I mean, we're a women-owned fund and our employee is a woman. So you could argue that we are sort of not really the target audience, but I think any investment firm should do this. I mean, for us, I kind of went through and kind of drafted a document, and I was going to just say, like, here's the document, but Julie, my co-founder, encouraged us to kind of go through the process of working through it together. And I think it's much better document. I mean, part of it is, yes, addressing things like sexual harassment, but also issues just like general protocol. Like all the documents that I looked at when we were creating our own code of professionalism were focused around employees, and we don't really we have one employee.
Right.
And, you know, when she's engaging with the world, she doesn't have any employees. And so the question is, well, then who are we talking about here? And we had to kind of come up with our own term of colleagues, which encompassed, you know, entrepreneurs that are pitching us, entrepreneurs that you may never want to invest in, but are kind of referring deals our way, other investors, journalists, and understanding like what is or isn't appropriate. And I think especially for women employees, also making it clear when they can leave. I think everybody in firms like ours is really hard charging, and they want to be in every room and they want to be talking to everybody, and they might feel bad about removing themselves from a situation that's uncomfortable. And so empowering them to say, like, actually, if you feel uncomfortable, if this is taking place in a hotel room or some other venue that's inappropriate, whatever it might be, like the imperative is to leave. Like, I actually want you to leave.
Get out.
And making that very explicit, I think, is really valuable to sort of say, like, I'm your boss and I'm telling you if this happens, leave.
I think this needs to be explicit because some people just don't understand it. Like, if the idea that a VC would date entrepreneurs just to me seems mind-bogglingly stupid.
But it's not just entrepreneurs then. It's like, you know, they pitched us 3 months ago. Does that count? You know, and so I think the idea...
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if you passed on it, could you... See, and this is a whole new issue because it used to be, I don't know how old each of you are, I'm 47. When I went into the workforce, I guess in the late 80s, it was pretty explicit that you would probably find your spouse at work. It was kind of the design of work in a way. Like people said that, like, oh yeah, hopefully you meet somebody. Now that's just off the table, as it should be.
I mean, I think sometimes it's off the table. When I first drafted our code of professionalism, when I was just doing it in my own head, I was just like, no dating ever. That is the policy. But I'm also married, and so maybe it's less
easy
important
for us.
For me.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I went and looked at a lot of the best practices for a lot of the big firms that actually don't say dating is verboten. They say, we understand that these things happen, but these are the circumstances in which it's acceptable or unacceptable. Like if you're dating someone who directly reports to you, for example, or, you know, in the case of investors, you know, I think we came up with something that was like, you know, within 3 months of them having a professional pitch, for example, they're off the table. I think there's no like hard and fast rule, but the point is you have to be deliberate about putting these things forward. And actually, I thought about initially just like putting our document on our website and saying like, other investors, if you want to copy it. Yeah,
you should totally do that.
See, I thought about that. And then I was talking to a few other folks who said, ultimately, these were LPs who said the firms that actually have these in place already, for the most part, are the worst actors because they didn't co-create them with their team. And so ultimately, like the process of not just copying it and being like, take it, sign it, live it, you know, but instead saying like, we're going to make this together.
Right. They're not actually making the decisions and asking why they need to do it.
Right. So I think that like these sample documents coming out is a really great first step, but I hope people don't just take them as is. I hope they spend some time crafting them to fit their particular firm.
Attorney, you feel like touching the third rail?
Oh, absolutely not. But I will mention one thing, that a piece of news that came out. You were talking about, you know, specific rules. There was a Wall Street Journal thing that came out a couple of weeks ago that at Facebook, you get to ask somebody out on a date once. That's how it works.
That's the rule?
Yeah. Which by the way, I broke that story. That was in Chaos Monkeys, actually, in my onboarding. Like, you know, they had the whole like pep rally thing, and then at the end they had to like, okay, here's the HR lecture. And part of the HR lecture was you get one no, and that's it. After that, I
like that, actually, one no.
Well, it's quantifiable. Anyhow, yeah, that's...
Well, no, what's good about it is a developer would understand it.
Right.
And obviously... Right. Never should you ask a subordinate out on a date.
Right. No, I think that's implied.
Insane.
Yeah, that's insane. Right. Yeah.
But I don't know if people understand that. My understanding is it's technically, it's not legal to tell your employees they can't date.
No.
That's not legal, but you can tell them that they have to report it, is my understanding.
You know, I'm not an HR expert, but I think the general point is, like, as much as you want to forbid something, being realistic about human behavior is also an important part about having effective policies. And so, like, being like, nothing is ever going to happen ever, like no alcohol ever, no dating ever, like, then people are just going to lie to you. And I think for me as a boss, like, I don't want that. But alcohol is something that is one of the suggested pieces of the document, which I think is so hard to enforce.
Oh, I've enforced it myself, actually, for maybe 15 years of hosting events. When I hosted events in New York, open bar, because my brother was a caterer.
Yeah.
So we got all the booze at a great price. I wasn't paying like $20. So we'd have these parties that would go to 1 a.m.
Yeah.
They would start at 6 and go to 1 a.m. in New York. I had the best parties. These were crazy, awesome parties that could not happen in today's environment. And inevitably, there is some idiot at every party who's like, open bar? I'll take 3 vodka tonics with 3 double vodka tonics. And you're like, slow down, cowboy, you can come back. They're like, I want them now in case there's a line.
Right.
And people get rip-roaring drunk. So I just decided all my parties would end by 8 o'clock and no hard liquor, wine and beer. And I used to keep the bar open like 3 hours, then 2 hours. And now I think we're down to an hour and a half. And I do sit-down dinners with small groups of people. I just don't do these big parties anymore because I just don't want to have somebody come to me having been harassed, or somebody puking at one of my events. It's not classy or fun.
I think that's totally fair. And, you know, I wouldn't be like prescribing to other firms a hard and fast rule about what to do or not. But I think understanding that those situations make people uncomfortable or worse. And it's just like, why would you want to, like, is it really super important to be there at midnight?
That's the big thing, is it's not worth it. You can go out at night with your friends. If you're doing a business thing, I started moving things to like lunchtime, or at Angel University, we had dinner at 5:30. We finished at Wilson Cincinnati at 5, 15 minutes of glass of wine there, right downstairs to the restaurant, 5:30, dinner done by 7. Get to go home to my kids. I don't need to deal with any shenanigans. And this idea that you're like a VC and you're inviting a female founder to dinner?
It's weird.
Like, really? Come on. That's just smarmy.
It's weird. And I
have
think
lunch. Do it at an office. Do you do dinner meetings with founders?
I don't like people watching me eat. So that is like a different, like, I mean, in like, if we're having like a chatty dinner as friends, it's totally fine. But the idea of like, I need to get through these points. I want to review this deck, and then sort of, you know, shoving a sandwich in my face. Like, I'm just odd like that. And I don't like
it's not
having
odd. It's
eating
not
meetings.
efficient.
But that's just my own weird personal preference.
I think that should be the rule. No meetings outside of the office. And you should do no meetings alone. That's another mistake people make. I do meetings. I have no closed office. I got cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
And I do all my meetings. Well, I have security cameras everywhere, right? I mean, and I have meetings with 3 people in the room. Because I want more people than one partner to understand it. Who's going on a Saturday night to a meeting?
Yeah, that's odd. I mean, I think I've had some really effective networking events in the evenings, and there has been wine. But to your point, there's food and there's no hard liquor. It ends at a reasonable hour, like 8:30.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a group session. I don't think the answer is like a hard and fast rule, but just being deliberate about where you're inviting people is good.
Well, you didn't get tagged as going to the Steve Jurvetson orgy party like I did. And I have to put out a statement that my wife and I went to a party that was one of the 10 most boring parties I've ever been to in my life.
Yeah.
So
with 250 people. Yeah, this was like the most boring. I mean, of the orgies we've been to, Antonio, they were much more interesting. But literally 250 people at a party.
I think the term was cuddle puddle.
And then other people said there was sex going on. It's like, I was there for like 2 hours with my wife, saw very famous people, every partner at Draper Fisher Jervis. There was no sex going on. Like 0. It was bizarre. Anyway.
No cuddle puddles either, right?
I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to, forget it. I'm not going to any more industry parties. Enough.
Really? So you don't socialize? You're over the FOMO?
If we want to socialize, we'll have lunch or something. I don't know. I mean, just going to these, if that's the price of going to parties, I got to go defend myself that I was at an orgy with a sex bar. I mean, I don't want to have to defend myself. And the guy who wrote it.
You issued a public statement.
I had no choice. My friends are calling me from CNBC. This kid wrote a Medium post that said, I went to the party, and on the way to the party, at the hotel next to the location, this was at the Draper Fisherson, like portfolio event, which I do a fireside chat every year for the last 4 years. They have an after party, and they have an after party to the after party. So I go to the after party and the after party to the after party. And this kid is wearing a Burning Man outfit. I'm leaving. It was a costume party. I was dressed as Indiana Jones, like 90% of the men there. And because it was a jungle theme.
Or Han Solo, yeah.
Or Han Solo, yeah, same thing. And the kid's like, oh, you going to Steve's party? I was like, yeah, I'm going to Steve's party. Do you need a ride? He's like, no, I don't need a ride. And then in the back of his head, he's like, I'm just going to skewer you in a Medium post. So he writes a Medium post. All this drugs was taking. The Medium post was, it was worse than you can imagine.
Oh, I thought this was the Brotopia thing. Emily.
No, it is the Brotopia. So she wrote the Brotopia thing, but then somebody wrote a thing that I went to this party. It was worse than you can imagine. I heard Elon Musk was there. So Elon's got all the issue statement. And I saw Jason at the hotel with his wife, and he offered me a ride. I saw no drugs. I saw no sex at the party, but it was worse than you can imagine. And I'm like,
I mean, I think the challenge is it may not have been for you, but it could have been for other people. And just like creating that environment where that type of stuff goes down is dumb.
It was like a dance party. It was like a costume party, like the most benign thing you've ever seen.
But you say that, but like I've had to deal with entrepreneurs or people who work for me or me myself going to like a conference like and getting groped, and maybe you didn't have that, but I did, and that was my experience. And so I think being realistic that like these places are breeding grounds for bad
Definitely
behavior.
For people with alcohol, yes.
It's just stupid.
It's just dumb. Okay, there you have it, folks. But I will say, please do not send a bunch of reporters to Burning Man and ruin Burning Man.
What you do in your own time is no one wants to be the behavior police, but I think we are professional. Like we're a firm. I mean, Venture operates in a weird space where it doesn't all happen in the office, and as a result, like we have to be more mindful about our behavior.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah, I guess I'm just a little bit like hurt that like I got dragged into this. Like,
you go to Burning Man, Jason?
I've been to Burning Man 3 times.
Oh.
When was the last time you went?
Last year, the year before, and then 12 years ago.
Are you going this year?
I don't think I'm going to.
You go to Africa Burn? That's the new.
I don't know about that. What is that?
It is the burn that takes place in. I think it's in South Africa.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
Do you go?
No, but my husband is South African and has been trying to convince me to go. And I said I'd be more likely to do that one than that.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I don't want to see everybody I know.
When I go to Burning Man, you're obviously wearing like a mask or a hat or goggles because of sand. You've been to Burning Man?
No.
Anyway, it's easy to be cynical about Burning Man. Burning Man is actually pretty dope. Like great music, great people, great concept that there's only water, and the art, which I like art, is like incredible. Like you cannot see the scale of art going on there is just otherworldly. The creativity is insane. The size of it, the location. But I'm actually thinking maybe I don't go because when I go, like I get people stop me to take a selfie or something. Oh yeah, I like your podcast. And I'm like, am I going to go to this thing? And then like people are going to be like,
you're too famous, man. That's the thing.
It's not even being famous. It's just the culture we're in is like.
So I know of a yurt in Washington that you could go to during Burning Man. If you
That's what I would do. I'd go to a yurt. I'm going to go on Airbnb.
I do actually have a yurt up in Washington. When I want to Burning Man out and like get away from the world and do whatever crazy shrooms, staring at the trees, having your encounter with whatever. Yeah, that's where I go.
You go to the yurt.
I DIY my Burning Man. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to DIY.
Not much in the way of art though. Yeah.
All right, this has been an amazing episode. Facebook. Crypto, all this Burning Man. I think we covered everything. We
didn't talk about guns though, but
we did talk about guns. You're right.
Yeah. I had a weird call about it, so that's why I'm injecting. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
What was the call about?
You might. I think we're not going to talk about guns, obviously, because like the internet does not need a discussion on guns. But I was raised in South Florida. I did not go to the high school, but south of that, I went to Miami. I've got a friend down there who's in law enforcement, and he called me saying, "Hey, we got this thing going on about the shooting, and we'd really appreciate your help." And I'm like. Okay, like what the hell is this about?
Facebook live stream?
No. It was just a private phone call. But so I call the guy. He's on the SWAT team at one of the counties there. And it turns out, I won't name the school because it may not be public, but there's a high school there that we both care about. And they were getting pitched by a social media management software company to effectively go through, the Facebook, Instagram, whatever, social media feeds of all their students
and find the crazy
programmatically
people.
Figure out sort of pre-shooting,
Oh yeah, Minority Report, the precogs.
It's a mix. Right, it's a mix of Cambridge Analytica and Minority Report on Facebook, effectively.
Yeah. The precogs were determining, if I remember correctly, Minority Report, if people were doing crime or would be likely to do a crime.
Right, which raises a question like, well, are they guilty of a crime yet? Anyhow, they're so freaked out down there, they're kicking indoors to anyone who even shows any sign of obviously being in that way. So and I just find it interesting that capitalism and tech was already coming in and seizing the opportunity. The software was really expensive, by the way. That's why they were thinking.
To sort through the students.
Yeah.
It was $100 a student. Were they charging per head?
No, it was beyond our LTV calculations, which is like 100. Yeah, it doesn't matter, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. And I just find it so interesting that they would actually do that. And like, what does that mean? Like, what do you do if you snag a kid supposedly in that? Like, do you
check to see if he's bought guns?
Yeah, right. Well, right.
And I use the word he specifically because it's only boys who are doing this. Hasn't been a female shooter yet.
Right. So.
Right, yeah. Who knows?
Anyway, I just find that really strange and cool and like so odd. Not cool, but like just weird.
I watched the CNN. You saw it too, Clara. Yeah, the CNN gave me hope in this next generation of whatever they call them, the connected generation.
Gen Z, I think.
Gen Z. I like to call them Gen Z, but Gen Z is good too. The connected generation, they seem to have a level of chutzpah and outspokenness and directness that maybe millennials and Gen X didn't have, or like a level of empowerment that I've never seen. I mean, I think people say this is what the 60s was like, just young people just walking up to old people and saying, no, we're changing this, we're taking it over, you're going to be dead soon. And what were your impressions of that when you saw those young students giving it to Speaker Ryan, I guess, got it the worst?
I loved it. I mean, I think for me, the question that we always get as investors with a sort of mission-driven focus is like, when is technology going to solve the gun crisis? Or when is technology going to solve homelessness? And ultimately, I think that's a really naive question. It really does come down to people who are driving like long-term policy change. And so it's really exciting to see so many young people say like, no, the answer is not building an app for that. It is showing up and having a really hard dialogue with our politicians who are not doing a good job. So I loved it.
I thought it was really good to see Paul Ryan. I give him a lot of credit for showing up.
You're talking about the Paul Ryan one or the Rubio one?
Oh, sorry, Marco Rubio. Sorry.
Wow, you confused those two.
I was sorry. They do look alike. Marco Rubio, rather. I give him a lot of credit for I mean, that was insane for him to go to that as a NRA supporter. But I guess
as an
he's
elected
changing.
Official doing like a town hall after a crisis. No, I think that's like the very bare minimum that's acceptable.
Think about how many people would skip it.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
It's so easy to skip. So the fact that he actually did it, and then he says, I am going to change my position on this. No, people are not going to like it, but American
politics. I think the people will like it.
That's exactly right. And maybe he knew that, and that's why he did it, is he knows people are going to like this. Because he was like, maybe we have to change our position on the number of bullets in a gun because it would be less deadly if you had to change the clip. And it's like, well, where have you been for the last 20 years, idiot? Like, that's what everybody's been saying. Like, these things have 30 bullets in the magazine. It's not necessary, even if you're a hunter. You're going to shoot the deer 30 times?
I'm excited.
I think things are going to change. I like the idea of like maybe 25 years old to buy the assault rifle, 25 to buy anything high caliber, 21 to buy the other stuff. That would be a good change.
I think letting communities decide for themselves is a good place to start, but letting people actually have a voice in making that happen is exciting, and having young people participate because their lives are ultimately at stake is just awesome.
I'm trying to find a non-lethal gun replacement. We had somebody pitch us on it recently, I understand.
There was a really, I know you both love podcasts. There's a 99% Invisible episode about the history of Taser.
Ah, yeah.
Which you should listen to. That was really fascinating.
I've heard a little bit about that, yeah. A lot of people died from heart attacks, right?
It's a thing. They no longer say it's I forget what it was. The language,
non-lethal.
It used to be non-lethal. Now it's like
less lethal.
Something like there's some like qualification that is sort of
people
slipped
have
in there.
Yeah, people have heart attacks from it. Yeah,
but people misuse it. Like you're supposed to shoot them once, but there are all these like they got shot 11 times with And
it's used as a torture device and as a retribution device by cops. Like they literally shoot somebody and they just keep pulling the trigger on it to shock them.
It's interesting though. I talked to an investor recently and I asked them, what has been the best, most recent innovation within the weapons space and or the public safety space generally, and they said the biggest change was Taser, and they hold them up, and I was like, that was in the 70s, like that's a really old company. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the problem is, so I'm thinking public about it. I do own firearms, although I'm not a gun nut at all.
I own a firearm.
Yeah. So, yeah.
If you want to jump the fence, it would not be a good idea.
But, I think I think some of the technical challenges, the reason why they like guns is because, at this point, it's kind of a proven technology. And if if the smart gun mechanism or whatever worked as well as like the fingerprint thing on my phone, there's no way I would put that on the gun, because it's precisely when your hands are shaking and you're sweaty that thing absolutely must work.
Hold on a second.
Right.
I got to clean the surface here. Yeah. Face ID didn't work. I was wearing sunglasses.
Although that said, I mean, I do keep it in a safe, which is what a responsible gun owner does, which inevitably induces a time lag. So it's not really the time lag per se. It's the fact that it could just fail.
I keep it on my ankle.
I'm stuck.
At all times?
No, I have a carry permit.
Great.
Really?
I don't. But I'm looking into it.
That's hard in the California, actually.
San Mateo allows you to have it now.
That's right, and
I live in
Alameda.
San Mateo.
Oh, okay. Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
So I'm gonna at least take the course, and I think I'm gonna apply for it.
Interesting. And why do you feel you need that? I'm gonna take the anti-gun.
I've had 3 stalkers.
Oh, really? Okay.
I live on essentially like a compound where if somebody were to jump the fence,
You're a public figure. Yeah.
It would be my responsibility to defend the house. It would not. Wow. The police would not be there in time. It would take them 10 minutes probably.
Have you ever carried in the past, out of curiosity? Not to totally harp on this, but
I was trained
I see.
by a CIA agent, and so I had the firearm in a locked container in my car, going to and from the place. But there was a period of time when I had a stalker showing up at my office in LA.
Jesus. Wow.
In which case we just put in security measures, and I was trained by Knoll Security and some other folks, and yeah.
Interesting.
But I don't want to own guns. I understand why people would. I think the real easy compromise is these high caliber, it's a no-brainer. We don't need to have AK-47s, AR-15s. These things are just way too powerful. I think it should be like an insurance thing. If you have a revolver, it's $50 a year in insurance, and then for every caliber above and bullet above, you pay insurance. And that would just lower the number of guns. And the idea, if you had an AR-15, you should have an insurance policy based on the number of bullets and how many people that can kill. So if you want to put a 30 magazine clip in there, that should be banned, period. But let's just say a 15, which is what a Glock will do and other ones. You should have a $1 million coverage for each bullet in your gun that it's capable of. So that would be $15 million in insurance. It would cost you whatever it is, $1,000 a year to have a gun, which is what if you have a car, if it's a sports car and it goes faster, or it's a bigger car and it's more deadly, you're going to have to pay more.
Yeah, but that's based on the actual risk, right? I mean, the reality is that the vast majority of firearms never harm anyone, right? And so the actual insurance risk is...
You get one gun for free. You don't need to insure it.
Right.
If it's under 6 bullets. If you have over 6 bullets, then you start paying insurance.
Yeah, a lot of countries do that. You can limit the number of firearms you can own.
That's a no-brainer. Like we have an unlimited...
Yeah. I mean, I think the weird reality is New York Times actually did a piece on views on gun control. And the interesting thing, why I think it's so interesting, is that the majority of gun owners, we're not talking about the left anti-gun, the majority of gun owners actually support a lot of these measures. But
I do.
Right. And as do I. But, obviously the NR wing is kind of fanatical about the whole thing. And then 2, I think a lot of people who, own guns are deeply suspicious of the left or the anti-gun side. And whenever any one of these things happen, like banning is literally the first thing on the table. And I think that makes them dig their heels in.
That's what created that.
Right. But the reality is, like, it's funny. I don't think anti-gun people actually even realize that by and large they already have the votes to implement these policies, including the gun people. Like, I mean, the 10% fanatical wing on
so the NRA is just
like, forget those.
Yeah, the NRA has just paid everybody off to not make any movement.
I don't believe that's true, because I was looking up the numbers. I mean, here's a pop quiz. Is NRA among the top 50 political donors in this country? No.
They did 70 million this year.
But I think the point is that you don't have to donate to everyone. You have to donate in specific regions and to specific politicians. Just like
no gun for you, Clara?
I mean, my mom grew up on a farm in Wisconsin. My dad's from the South. I grew up shooting guns and got certified numerous times in West Virginia with my dad. I enjoy it from a recreational perspective.
Yeah, I like shooting clay pigeons.
I think regardless, though, like the current system is not working, and we can all get behind that, and ultimately, like, something has to change, and it's not just going to be business as usual, I hope, moving forward.
I wish we had a non-lethal bullet or contraption for the first bullet or 2 that comes out of a police officer's gun, or giving them 2 guns. This gun is the lethal gun, this gun is the semi-lethal gun. So if you're dealing with an emotionally disturbed patient at EDP, you don't have to take out your lethal gun. You could take out your non-lethal gun, which would incapacitate them, break some ribs or whatever.
Yeah. Have you ever been shot by a rubber bullet, out of curiosity?
I have not.
I haven't either, but I've been in a crowd that was being shot at.
Really?
And, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where?
In Pamplona. I studied in 1 year in northern Spain.
What's it like to get hit by one? People?
Well, no. Well, yes. I mean, it's a ball. In the case of Spain, they actually...
beanbags.
It was a rubber ball about that big with what looked to be a metal core in it.
Oh yeah, so it'll break your jaw.
That's the thing. Like it's like the taser. It's supposedly non-lethal.
Oh no,
it might put you in a hospital for a long time.
Yeah, it could crack your skull.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
so in a traffic stop,
right,
where you see people get shot point blank range with a Glock. Right. There's no way they're recovering from that. Whereas if it was rubber bullets and you whack the person 4 or 5 times,
yeah, it's less lethal. Sure.
Yeah, they might break some ribs, but we're not going to kill them. I mean, people are getting anyway. Thank you for tuning into This Week in Dystopia. The world is screwed. No, it feels like the world is getting better, right? We're optimists, right?
That's what Steven Pinker seems to say. Yeah.
I just started listening to his book. Did you start listening to the new book?
Enlightenment Now, yeah, I did. I started.
I'm like
it.
3 chapters in. What do you think so far?
I'm not far enough into action.
Yeah,
I read one of the excerpts. I think it's a great defense of the Enlightenment. I think it's great.
That's what I like about it. It's like we might want to go back to science and truth.
Right.
Objective truth no longer exists. All right. If you're thinking about raising money and you're a serious entrepreneur, you know who to call. Clara Brenner is looking to write checks to the right people. You can follow her on the Twitter, Clara_Brenner, Brenner. And Urban Innovation Fund, you can Google it. Generally doing seed to Series A.
Yep. We're writing checks somewhere between, I'd say usually 100 to 500K initially.
Right. If you want to know about her investment strategies, go to angelpodcast.com, where you did a great job, by the way. Thank you. People had great feedback on that. And Antonio Garcia Martinez is, you know what? I always...
That was good.
That was good.
Well, no, the problem is I always think Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Right.
Who I love. I mean, what a great author, surrealist. Like,
it goes back to the,
and
New York.
One day the confusion will go the other way, I'm sure. Okay.
Exactly. No, but every time I say your name, because it does have the...
Right. I know.
I'm not the first person.
No. People actually do that. Yeah, they say Antonio Garcia Marquez. Yeah, they say Antonio Garcia Marquez. Yeah.
Is the author of Chaos Monkeys. You should absolutely listen and/or read it as quick as possible. He's a contributor to The Wired, and his new book, which is going to be called The Enlightenment 2.0. Enlightenment 2.0 is coming out. HarperCollins. No. Who's your publisher?
HarperCollins, actually.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, is Hollish your editor? Who's your editor?
No, Jennifer Bart.
Okay. Yeah. Are you HarperCollins Business?
No, just regular HarperCollins.
Just regular. Yeah. HarperCollins Business. That's why. Great publisher, huh?
It is.
They
nice
do a good job.
It's very nice. Yeah. Very impressed.
When's your book coming out,
Great.
Clara? You got to write your book.
No, I don't have the patience. I struggle to get things down on paper.
Do you?
Well, I like to keep it short generally.
All right. Well, we tried today, but we never succeed. All right. Hey, and by the way, thanks to Jamie Siminoff and Ring and the Black Tux. Go ahead and get your Ring and install it while wearing a black tux. Super easy peasy. Okay, thank you again. Emmy award-winning producer Jackie. You make the show amazing. You are my rock. Thank you so much for everybody's like, oh my God, Jason, your show is getting better and better. I'm like,
it's Jackie.
It's all Jackie. Everybody knows that. And Jacob. Thank you for your technical skills and your enthusiasm. All right. We'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.